Kamala Harris and her husband, Doug Emhoff, are greeted by the co-chairs of the Congressional Inaugural Committee, that is Senator Blunt and Senator Amy Klobuchar, welcoming them. We're pausing to see if we can pick up some of the audio. You have two senators here. Joe Biden served 36 years in the United States Senate.
All I can think of, Nora, is that big, long line of steps. I'm looking at Dr. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Amy Klobuchar. I'm thinking, boy, that's a lot of steps, fellas, to climb. But they look absolutely beautiful today. They're in purple. I like that color choice. Red and blue makes purple. Dr. Joe Biden in teal. What were you going to say, John?
Well, I'm thinking about the distances that Joe Biden has traveled in his career, and some of them are quite short today, but they are incredibly powerful. He's walking into his old office, basically,
right.
And yet this time he's now walking to be the most powerful person on the planet. You know, he used to be in front of the Resolute desk. Now he's going to be on the other side of the Resolute desk. He used to have to drive on that motorcade down Massachusetts Avenue. Now the commute is just going downstairs. He used to have to be invited into the beast that Nora was just talking about, the presidential limousine. Now he's its most important passenger. He was a player in his whole career in all of these buildings and all of these places, but adjacent. And now just a few steps, he moves just a few steps over, and now he's at the center of it.
So I was thinking in many ways this is very familiar to him, of course, as you point out, but it's also brand new.
Sure.
That's what I think is so exciting. This is now all for you.
And Major made the point earlier about the distinctions between the two presidencies. We had a president before who had no political or military service, the first time ever, and now we have a president who is marinated in the legislative and the executive branches like no other president before.
It has been 12,279 days since he first ran for president, June 9th, 1987.
Do you have a calculator, Ed O'Keefe? That's pretty good.
Just an excellent group of CBS producers and researchers. What we see now, of course, they are walking inside the east front of the Capitol. Let's bring in Cedric Richmond, who just resigned from his congressional seat in Louisiana to join the incoming Biden administration as a White House senior advisor and director of the Office of Public Engagement. And Congressman, I know you have been so close with Joe Biden through this whole campaign and even advising him after his victory. Just how ambitious is it, and just what is the goal of the president to sort of hit the ground running even tonight?
Well, let me just tell you, I've spent a little over 2 years with him, and I know one thing. He has an ambitious agenda, and he wants to be a transformational president, and that means empowering people, getting this country back together. We can't do anything until we get COVID under control and restore the economy. But at the same time, we're still going to fight the challenges of climate, systematic racism, immigration, and all those other issues. But he is laser focused and dead serious about this.
Congressman Richmond, thank you so much for joining us. It's Gayle King. It's really good to hear your voice. I'm wondering what this means to you personally. It's such a day of history. You've got Joe Biden, a very good friend of yours. You're going to be very involved working with him. And then we've got Kamala Harris. I don't think we can state enough the significance of this day for her.
Look, it is an amazing day, and a day that, you know, we work very hard with. And look, for me, it's a great day, but you know that I'm missing a dear friend, Virgil Miller, who should be here with me today, but he's not, and we're praying for him. But Kamala Harris is a very special woman. She's always overcome odds. She's always been a trailblazer, but she has such a great touch and feel for working families and people who are struggling, just like Joe Biden does. So as president and vice president, I think that they're going to be a champion for people who are just doing the best they can to keep a roof over their head and clothes on their back and food on the table. And they'll have a champion in the White House. So I think it's going to be a very special day.
Cedric Richmond, so good to have you, and best of luck to you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
And And we're just listening into the Marine Band here, a tune you may recognize.
I think it's so good, considering what we've all been through, to see this happening today this way. You know, there was all sorts of conversation if it would take place, outside. And the fact that they're doing it and have so many of the touches that are familiar to us, to me, is very reassuring to see.
It is a can we moment.
Yes.
Because 2 weeks ago, we collectively took our breath in and said, can we do this?
Yes.
Can 2 weeks from now, can we have this place look as beautiful as it looks, as calm as it looks, and carry out this ceremony?
I think
there were obviously people with great intention in Congress who said, not only are we going to get back to work that night, we're going to make sure all of this looks as it should. Whether the president's here or not, this is going to look as it should. And we're going to have this moment for the country and for the world to see. And I'm grateful that we do.
In the year 2021, America is getting its first female vice president, its first black vice president, its first vice president of Asian American descent.
Nora, I'm bursting.
It's
hard for me to stay in my seat, honestly.
Because it is so important, and there is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Chairman Milley, arriving as well. It is so important for many people to be able to see someone that looks like themselves in positions of power. And so it is a groundbreaking moment. It is one that, you know, mothers are huddled around their television sets with their daughters today saying, don't forget this moment. Don't forget it. Joining us now is Lonnie Bunch, the founding director of the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. And Lonnie, I know we've talked about this before, and I keep reminding myself today not to let that thought go about just how remarkable this moment is to have our first female vice president.
I think it's so important to realize that what an inauguration really is, it really is the promise of our democratic traditions. And what the election of the Vice President of Kamala Harris means is that now that promise is made real. People can see, as you said, young women, people of color, can see that it's possible. And what that means is that as people look to the Biden administration, they're looking at it to say, is this an administration that will help us believe in America, help us believe in the possibilities of America? Because for me, what happens with Kamala Harris and with President Biden, is it helping me realize that what inauguration really is, what I hope happens today, is that we will have a president who will define reality and give us hope.
How soon will she be added to the museum, Lonnie Bunch? Do you already have the display ready, Mr. Bunch? I know you're on top of things.
As soon as she gives us great stuff, she's there.
Something tells me she's got great stuff. Listen, she's accomplished a lot of firsts in her life, and I remember her talking about her mom. Her mom said, "You may be the first, but you won't be the last." And I think about so many little girls who are watching today, as we did with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, saying, "I want to be like that," and they're looking at Kamala Harris, going, "I want to be like that." I think that's a great feeling for young girls of color who are watching. Young girls really of all colors, honestly, to be honest with you. This is such a huge accomplishment today.
And what it allows us to do is to look to the presidency for leadership with honor and to recognize that having a vice president means everything is possible for so many other people. And so I think that for me, this is one of the most exciting moments. The question becomes, can one, by defining reality and giving hope, can now one make the fundamental changes that'll help bring a country together?
Lonnie Bunch, it's John Dickerson here. The Museum of African American History and Culture is a museum to hope. People who hoped when there didn't look like there was a lot of reason to have hope in America. You talked about hope. There are a lot of people who are hopeful today but see a pretty dark picture as well. Can you just talk a little bit more about hope and where it comes from?
In some ways, if we use history, and especially African American history, we realize that there have been moments of great darkness and great pain. But people have been able to come together, to cross racial lines, to find that hope. In many ways, African Americans have always helped America live up to its stated ideals. So I recognize what a difficult moment we're in. But I have to believe, looking back at history, that with the right leadership, with the right collaboration, we can move a country forward. The notion is that we will never get to the promised land. But the key is to take those steps to move us forward. And I'm hopeful that the president-elect and the vice president-elect can help lead a country and bring us together.
And we're about to see the Senate leadership come through those doors on the west front of the Capitol. That was the scene of just 2 weeks ago of where the mob tried to push through and crush an officer in the doors there. Much different scene today. I want to bring in Margaret Brennan of Face the Nation. Margaret?
Well, you know, we're at 46% of the cabinet being female. That's fairly close to gender parity, at least the closest we've ever gotten at this point. And I wonder what the specifics are that Lonnie Bunch and others would call for in terms of moving beyond representation into actual practice. What are the specifics to move this country forward, to actually see the diversity that's being called for?
In many ways, I think that there's a troika of activities, right? One is dealing with the virus, one is dealing with the economy. But I think equally important is to say that racial reconciliation, healing, fairness really needs to be the third leg of that stool. And so people are going to look to see, yes, how we handle the pandemic, how we get the economy working. But I'm going to look to see, how do we help cross that racial divide? How do we help make sure that people recognize that the country cannot be what we want it to be unless it grapples with and effectively deals with what has always divided us, which has been race?
Lonnie Bunch, always good to have you. Thank you so much. And let us know when the new Kamala Harris exhibit, as Gail says, we'll be there.
We want to come.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Lonnie. And as we see now, this is the Senate leadership that is making its way onto the presidential platform. The Senate President pro tem, Charles Grassley of Iowa, who is in his 80s and well, I guess we're...
It's going to be Pat Leahy now.
It's going to be Pat Leahy now, yes, absolutely, of Vermont. We're switching parties, right? It was Republicans, now it's the Democrats.
Ed's head was on a swivel.
And on a day of first, we should point out that the new Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, will be the first Jewish Senate Majority Leader and the first from New York.
Yes, and there is Chuck Grassley right behind. Difficult to see him because he's got his hat on. He knows how to dress for the cold. And
isn't it interesting how you can still recognize everybody with their mask?
Absolutely.
I mean, we've gotten now used to that.
Yeah. We're just about to see Dan Quayle, the former vice president, and Mrs. Marilyn Tucker Quayle. They are leaving what is the East Crypt Vestibule, and there will be trumpets as they enter onto the presidential platform as that ceremony is afforded the former vice president of the United States. I have to tell you, from being up there just this week, it's a sight like I've never seen before. It's really quite beautiful. And it is, I'm told it's windy today, and it was windy the other day. It gets cold up there pretty quickly, and there are not space heaters.
But Nora, that's the thing that struck me about your piece. I meant to email you about that. When you were talking to Senator Klobuchar and Senator Blunt, and you stood behind the podium, and you just let the camera say, this is the shot that they're going to be, this is the vantage point they will have. I got a little, Major, I've been feeling very dewy-eyed lately. We were talking earlier. I mean, when I saw that shot, I was filled with such pride in the way you set it up to say, look at this and look at what this represents.
It was, and majestic.
Yes.
It's a reminder of how great this nation's capital is, how beautiful the Capitol building is. It is.
The Capitol building that was a crime scene 3 weeks ago.
Absolutely.
And now here we are.
And now you see a socially distanced, secure Capitol for this peaceful transfer of power.
And to your point, Nora, it is the most beautiful vista up there.
Yeah.
When you spent time, as I did, for 10 years covering the Congress, you get to see it when you walk by. And we could thank Ronald Reagan for that, because before that, as you said, it was always on the East Front looking at the Supreme Court. It was sort of here are the three branches of government: executive, legislative, judicial. Ronald Reagan turned it out there looking west. Across the great vista of America was the way he wanted this ceremony to look and feel, and we have him to thank for that.
I have to say, I always took it for granted, the Capitol. I look at it so totally differently now, whether it's sunset, sunrise, whether it's raining, whether it's sunny. I look at it so differently. I've been to the Capitol many times, and I feel such reverence when you walk in. You almost feel like you have to whisper because it's such a sign of respect to be there. And to see what happened to it 3 weeks ago, and to here we are 3 weeks later on this very same day doing what we're doing is really a wonderful thing.
Well, there are a lot of people who feel after the last 4 years that there were a lot of parts of government they took for granted, and that they're looking at it in a different way. And part of today and part of the restoration that Joe Biden is promising is that after a presidency that was dedicated to disruption, and that's why President Trump was elected, to disrupt, you now have a presidency to restore, and that's in keeping with that sentiment you just articulated, Gail.
We're about to see some of the former presidents and first ladies arrive there on the platform. Let's bring in, though, CBS's Chris Van Cleve. He joins us now from the West Front. And Chris, it's hard to imagine just 2 weeks ago you were there when those rioters stormed the Capitol. Much different today.
Absolutely, Nora. You know, where we were standing as we watched people attempt to force their way in through the very entrance that we are seeing dignitaries and soon former presidents exit from and come out. That is now separated from where we were standing by a fence topped with razor wire. There are more National Guard in camouflage here than there are people. It is a stark change, and it was one looking back 2 weeks ago on this very day that it seemed almost impossible to imagine that you would have a situation where you could have an inauguration that resembled normal, and yet here we are today. It is normal, but it is also very not normal. This is my fourth inauguration in Washington. It is very strange to see only about 1,000 people here. There was a staffer out with what looked like a yardstick that they were using to make sure they had the proper distance between the chairs down here. Normally there'd be 250,000 people that would be ticketed to attend, that would be filling the lawn here, the same lawn that was filled with protesters just 2 weeks ago. It's certainly a very different day today. Nora?
And very different from the inaugural of President Barack Obama. I can remember that morning at 4 o'clock in the morning. People were running onto the mall just because of the excitement of having the first African-American president. There were more than 1 million people that packed. Even the president's closest advisors who had the special golden ticket, which you say, they never even got in with their family because it was so crowded.
Stretched all the way to the back of the
all the way to the, it was.
And it was about 2 degrees.
Yes, it was. I was on the east front of the Capitol covering it that year. So the president-elect is now at the Capitol. A number of the former presidents are going to be taking the platform. So we want to give everybody a quick second for a quick break, but we'll be right back in just a couple minutes.
Go on, take a look. You know you want to. Meeny, miny, moe. Catch a dead girl by her dog. This is awesome. Why is that? Why? Why not? Why ain't that?
The Little Things, rated R, in theaters and streaming exclusively on HBO Max.
Do a live shot if they want to take them. I'm ready to go. Okay, everybody steady on the platform. on the platform. I'll go over the other place and come back in. Steady on the platform. Oh, wow. I just saw that 3 to 5.
Yeah, I saw that. But you're not there yet.
I just told New York, look, let me know. Hey, you got careful. When you step on this, it shakes all day. And I'm available and ready to go if they want to take it. I was just going to wait here so we couldn't. Power's on this.
Technically, I don't have a live shot, but I'm just dialing in to be available just in case they change it. Yeah. No light. So I was just thinking.
Deep in there.
Fox News channel program, and if the control room decides to go to heating, I'm ready. Okay. Right.
Former President Barack Obama and Michelle Obama. They arrived just a short time ago. We have 3 of the 5 living presidents are there today to celebrate the inauguration of Joe Biden, the 46th President of the United States, saying hello to Congressman Clyburn and his wife. You know, this is, for like many people, it's the first time anybody's really seen anybody, you know, in 10 months. A lot of people have stuck to strict quarantines, especially since a number of the people are of a certain age. Members of Congress have been back at work. When I was up there earlier this week, I was told by Senator Blunt that everyone on that stage has been tested twice in the past 72 hours. And I said, oh, really, the former presidents too? And he said, absolutely. Every single person has been tested twice in the past 72 hours. So
That's
this is not
you
just
need to do that too. It shows we're taking it very, very seriously.
Right. It is not only secure from a law enforcement perspective, they're hoping it's secure from a virus perspective.
Testing could you point out we've been tested too here?
We have. We've been tested 3 times a week. Yes.
Yes, we've been tested too here.
And listen in now, they're announcing the Obamas. The Obamas arriving to applause. And We don't yet have the Biden family there. I'm sure if the Biden clan, which is a big one, it would have been even louder because they are all very, very tight, the Obamas and the Bidens, after serving 8 years together. Want to bring in now, for more insights on this historic day, presidential historian and biographer Doris Kearns Goodwin. And Doris, it's so good to have you with us. And let's talk about the historic challenges that Joe Biden faces. Are there any similarities with which he can draw insight from?
I think history really can provide solace and perspective. I mean, just think back on 1933 when Franklin Roosevelt was taking this very same oath that Biden will be taking today. The country's at rock bottom in the Depression. The banks have collapsed. People are starving in the streets. And he gives his inaugural address and he says it's not the people's fault. It's the absence of leadership that we've experienced. And I've been given that gift of leadership and I will provide it. I will act as if I'm a wartime president. There'll be national resources directed at the problem, and we'll have action, action, action. That speech alone produced headlines. The government still lives. We have a leader. And a man wrote in who his dog had run away, his roof had fallen off, his wife was mad at him, he lost his job. This is typical of millions of letters. He said, but now it's okay. You are there. You are my leader. It's the mystery of change, direction, a line of demarcation. I know how much harder it is today with the divisions in the society, but just looking at Joe Biden, maybe he will be that man for the moment. Maybe his years of experience in Congress, maybe his experiences with loss, maybe the resilience he's had to show, maybe the fact that he knows that both sides of the aisle, and he knows what it was like once when there was bipartisanship. He's been there that long. He may just be the right man to bring those experiences and that sense of resilience and loss and empathy and humility to this job. And we can hope for that. We saw it in Franklin Roosevelt, and hopefully we'll see a change right now.
And now we see Cole and Emma Harris, who are Emhoff, excuse me.
Yeah.
A lot of people speaking in my ear at the same time I'm trying to speak. I apologize. These, of course, are the stepchildren of the Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, and they call her.
What do they call her?
Mamala.
I love that.
Yes, this is the most exclusive group in the world right now on the presidential platform. We just saw Supreme Court justices arrive, and I mentioned, of course, the former presidents. There you see Justice Kavanaugh. The 3 Supreme Court justices are all there that President Trump appointed to the highest court.
Doris Kearns Goodwin, I have a question for you. We're just getting word that Donald Trump's plane has, in fact, just landed in Florida. As you know, he chose not to take part in the ceremony today. And you were talking earlier about the tradition and why that's so important. What is being missed with his absence today?
I mean, the most important reason why a former president who's lost an election comes and is willing to be there at the inauguration, it presents to the country a unified notion that the election is over. I've conceded the election. This is the person who's going to be there, and I'm rooting for them because I'm rooting for the country. How hard it must be for somebody who's lost an election, who's been president, who's been in the White House, who knows what it's like and has to leave his home and leave his presidency unfinished, and yet the grace and the dignity and the class that they show by being there. And I think for the country, it really means perhaps we're going to be able to take an understanding of the people who supported him, and they'll give a chance to that new person who's coming here. If the president himself is willing to be there, then we can be there too. It's leadership by example. So I think we're really missing. It's a big blank in this inaugural ceremony today. I so wish that President Trump had chosen, like his predecessors, like Bush 41, like Carter, like Ford, to be there and be a symbol to the country that we're moving forward.
And Doris, thank you. And just want to note that we are seeing the family of the president-elect arriving and just about to appear. You can see his children, Hunter Biden and Ashley Biden, Natalie, Finnegan, Maisley, Robert, and Naomi. All the grandkids. And Joe Biden is famously close with all of his grandkids, even his own children. In many cases, it's been said he speaks to them every single day. Yeah. I only say that because I can't imagine how he talks to every single one of them every day. I can imagine a text.
Yes, I've also heard that if he's in a meeting and one of them calls, no matter what happens, he takes a call and that they call him Pop.
Yes, and they have been on the road with him some of them when he was vice president, traveled with him, and certainly as he campaigned for president this year. And some of them are giving him advice now, sort of keeping him up to date on everything, saying, in particular, 2 weeks ago, when we saw the images of many of these mostly white male protesters and rioters enter the Capitol, one of his granddaughters said, this looks very different. Granddad, this looks very different from what we saw of the Black Lives Matter movement. And so he mentioned that in a speech.
And would have been treated differently. There is an underlying assumption.
Yes.
Is Doris still with us? Doris, could I ask you, the last time we talked, it was about the importance of concession. We did that for a piece for Sunday Morning. And not only did the president not concede, he hasn't even spoken the president-elect, the incoming president's name. He didn't do it in his closing remarks before getting on Air Force One. In addition to not having the ceremony, what is missing in America? And looking forward, what makes it more difficult to unify when the outgoing president won't even say the name of the incoming president?
I mean, it's not being willing to say the name, is not being willing to concede still that you did not win this election. And the real problem, I think, for all of us right now is that President Trump was able to fabricate a story that the election was stolen. And that story was what helped mobilize the people who went against the Capitol as an insurrectionist mob and almost tried to disrupt the most important ceremony when the counting of the votes was taking place. So until those facts can get really put into people, and hopefully a ceremony like this, so heartwarming to see it after 2 weeks ago, that this country moves on. I hope the world sees this as well as what they saw 2 weeks ago, will begin to persuade people of the facts. This is the man who won the election. This is our president. And as he begins to act and appear presidential, as he already has, by that ceremony so moving last night, by having the people from the other side of the Congress and both sides of the Congress in that mass ceremony this morning, hopefully by the tone of his speech and the actions he'll begin to take, then hopefully those supporters of Trump who thought he was their president will begin to see we have a president, just as they did with FDR. We have a leader. It's a long road to follow, and it's going to be a hard road to heal, but we've got to hope that America moves step at a time. And this is a really important step, this ceremony today.
Doris Kearns Goodwin, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Let's go now to CBS's Nancy Cordes. She's at the west front of the Capitol, where the president-elect and vice president-elect will be sworn in shortly, and most of their family has arrived. Nancy?
That's right, Nora. And so now we are just waiting for the president-elect himself and the vice president-elect to show up. Once they do, they will both be sworn in, followed, of course, by the inaugural address of President-elect Biden, which we're told will not only allow him to lay out, his guiding principles of his next 4 years of his presidency, but also we're told he is going to extend a hand to Trump supporters who he knows are still bitterly disappointed about the outcome of this election. So we're told that he will speak to his own supporters and to President Trump supporters as well.
And let's just listen in now as several more dignitaries are announced and entering the platform. It should be the Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence, who is representing the Trump administration. And, we should note, there's the former President's Club. There is no more exclusive club. And Bush and the Obamas have become quite close. Trump was never part of that club.
No, and he's chosen not to be a part of the ex-president club by not keeping with the traditions of the office. As you know, Nora, there was, because you talked to George W. Bush about this moment, there will be an amusing moment that George W. Bush had with his father that President Obama will have with President Biden after he's inaugurated, which is President Biden will say to President Obama, Mr. President, and President Obama will return and say, Mr. President. When you have that many presidents around, even though the title just goes with the one in the office, they all call each other Mr. President. There's going to be a lot of Mr. Presidenting around in the most exclusive club there.
Pence getting 4 ruffles and flourishes. Let's listen.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Vice President of the United States, the Honorable Michael R. Pence and Mrs. Karen Pence.
He will be Vice President of the United States for exactly another 57 minutes, and then will return to his home state of Indiana. He is a man literally without a home. Mike Pence has not owned real estate for several years. And he is now, the question about his future within the Republican Party. He chose this morning not to attend the departure of President Trump. And they have had a chilly relationship, certainly, in the past 2 weeks, although I was told by close advisors it has been strained for several months now.
Strained for several months, but chilly is not even begin to describe it. The vice president could have been a victim of the insurrectionist mob unleashed on the Capitol by the president's own rhetoric. That's a fact. Not only was it an attack on the legislative branch, one of its first victims could have been his sitting vice president. And all that time, when the safety and the whereabouts of the vice president was in doubt, the president never lifted a finger to help him or to find out how well he was or wasn't.
Or to call him or his family.
Mike Pence, the outgoing vice president, is the last most visible victim of that which President Trump has brought to politics. A loyalty that moves in one direction and one direction only.
And just to put a finer point on what Major is saying, no one was more loyal to President Trump than Mike Pence.
No one.
And it wasn't an abstract threat from President Trump. He said that Mike Pence could stop the count or the certification of the count, which Mike Pence could not do and which the president knew Mike Pence could not do.
A lie upon a lie upon a lie.
And which is why, when the insurrectionists arrived, they were on the spot, essentially, where the vice president's standing, although there's a platform there.
And they were
said,
chanting, hang Mike Pence, and they were storming the building saying, where is he?
Right.
Where is he?
We are just moments away from when they will announce the next Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, and her husband, Mr. Doug Emhoff. They will arrive just after this break. We'll give you a quick moment, and then we will be right back. We won't miss that moment. In just a moment.
Little girl is lost, and I'm taking her home.
News of the World is a tale of another time in America that couldn't be more important for these times.
She needs new memories.
News of the World, rated PG-13, now available on demand. Go to watchnewsoftheworld.com.
Your safety is our priority. That's why experts like Kyle install leaf filter gutter protection even on the coldest days. Snow and ice buildup on unprotected gutters can do real damage.
And the longer you go without leaf filter, the worse the damage gets.
Leaf filter filters out debris, allowing water to flow freely.
And you'll never worry about your gutters again.
Which is safer for everyone. Call 833-LEAF-FILTER or go to getleaffilter.com for your free gutter inspection and estimate.
Got my hair, got my head, got my brains, got my ears, got my heart, got my soul, got my mouth. I got love.
We are just seconds away from seeing the next Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, as she will be introduced to the dignitaries and invited guests that are there on the presidential platform. And we will pause when she is announced, but I think it's a good time to talk about the remarkable life and career of Kamala Harris. When I spoke with her last, she said the audacity of Biden to choose a black woman. But this is a woman who has an incredible and stellar career as the first female attorney general in California, first black senator from the state of California, only the second ever black female senator in the history of the United States Senate.
And even recalling in her goodbye message to Californians this week that she was once an intern to the late Senator Alan Cranston there at the Capitol, and then took his seat while she attended Howard University here in Washington. The history of her appointment, or for ascension today, really just can't be overstated. This is a huge moment, not only for women, not only for African Americans, for South Asians, for California. Just for so many, in so many different ways. And the blended family she brings with her that we'll see some members of up on this stage as well, I think is also a reflection of the country and the many blended families that there are. And most notably, I just keep thinking about her two stepchildren, Cole and Ella, who have been literally thrust out here today, having not been around much of this over the course of the campaign. Cole, the stepson, named for the saxophonist John Coltrane, Ella for Ella Fitzgerald, and the vice president very close with their mother, the former wife of Doug Emhoff, the 56-year-old attorney, first Jewish spouse of a U.S. vice president, the first second gentleman.
John? She's about to take the vice presidency under somebody who was a vice president and who filled out that job in a way, the vice president used to get a lot of, wasn't considered a top job, but it has in recent presidencies been elevated, and she now works for somebody who knows how important that job can be and how it can be very, very useful to a president. And so the work that she will do will be potentially quite substantive and very interesting, and so she's lucky that her boss was in that seat before her.
Kamala spoke about growing up and what her parents taught her, and she said, we grew up always being told that you have a responsibility to serve. She grew up in Berkeley, a noted seat of activism and liberal activism. Her mother from India, her father from Jamaica, both academics.
The door. Maria Miller-Lohmeyer, the acting Deputy House Sergeant-at-Arms, Kevin Grubbs, and the acting Deputy Senate Sergeant-at-Arms, United States Capitol Police Officer, Private First Class Eugene O. Goodman.
I love that. Big cheers there for Eugene Goodman. We all know his name now.
It's the guy who guards the back, the carriage entrance of the Senate. You walk in there every day, you saw him. And to now see him thrust into this position is quite an honor after what he went through 2 weeks ago.
Let's listen in now.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Vice President-elect of the United States, Kamala Debbie Harris, and Mr. Douglas Emhoff.
Yay, Kamala. Those cheers you hear are women, black and white, all around the world cheering for Kamala Harris. For those keeping track, she's wearing an ensemble by Christopher John Rogers, who's a Baton Rouge designer who lives in New York City, and Sergio Hudson. I know people are dialing their numbers now. She chose them to give her this look, which will now, maybe that will go into the museum. That Lonnie said we're looking for her to give us some good stuff.
Yeah. Her sister Maya there as well, and her niece. Her Maya worked on Hillary Clinton's campaign. There.
The precious moment there. President Obama taking a picture with his phone, having covered so many Obama rallies. So many people did that with him wherever he went, relentlessly. He's now on the other side of that moment of history.
Did he just take a picture of her, Major?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Darn, I didn't see that. There's Ella, okay, and Cole.
Let's bring in Margaret Brennan, moderator of Face the Nation. And this is the breaking of a glass ceiling. Margaret?
It is, and the symbolism is so resonant, and it means so much to so many. it's also so interesting, the arc of this political career, given that Senator Harris was one of the first to drop out when she was running for president herself against Joe Biden. She was criticized for not quite knowing which direction within the party she was headed. Was she an economic populist like an Elizabeth Warren? Was she going to be more of someone who embraced this tough on crime mantra that she had the reputation of having carried when she was Attorney General in California? And it didn't add up for her as a candidate on her 2 feet. And yet she provided this boost to Joe Biden when he became the nominee, of someone who could take his centrist Democratic politics and inject this new life of the new future of the Democratic Party. She is seen as that additive to his campaign ticket and seen as that supplement in so many ways. I think it'll be fascinating to watch what she does with this position, given how much of historical weight is on this, since she is a barrier breaker. What does she do for women in this role, given how hard hit women have been from COVID, particularly women of color? What does she do for them in the economy, given the lack of safety net that we know is there to help so many of the women who've had to drop out of the workforce to care for loved ones during the pandemic or educate their children? It's going to be fascinating to watch what she does with the office, I think.
Margaret, it's a great point. She will be heavily scrutinized because of that. And I asked her recently, what will your portfolio be? And she said, we haven't decided yet. I know that I'll be the last person in the room, but she declined to say whether she would tackle the economic package like Joe Biden did, or she would be the head of the coronavirus task force like Mike Pence was supposed to do. But no doubt that she can choose to do whatever she wants to do, I think, with Joe Biden. I'm also struck, too, she's the daughter of immigrants. This is very important for many people in this country. Not only as a black woman, as a woman of Indian American descent, but she is the daughter of immigrants. She grew up with that ethos, where her mother said to her, don't sit around and complain about things, do something.
And she took her mother's advice to heart. She said one of her big regrets is that her mother is not with us today on this special day, but she knows that her mom is looking down on her. I interviewed, here comes Nancy Pelosi.
And Staff Representative Michelle Grace
and Senator Klobuchar. I interviewed a couple of her childhood friends, someone who had known her since she was 5. What were we going to say, John?
Our first sighting.
Our first sighting of our president. President number 46. Heading to the door. Kamala's childhood friend, who's been with her since she was 5, is there today. I talked to a college friend who got her involved in AKAs, the sororities that you've heard so much about, the pink and green. She said when Kamala was a freshman, she ran for student body president, and people told her, it's not your time, you need to wait. And she said, nope. She told Jane Pauley the other day on Sunday morning, I eat no for breakfast. I love that. I like that mantra, Nora. I eat no for breakfast. And she ran.
And
let's just
let's
take this in for a moment. Jay says it's lightly snowing.
Going up to lunch.
Oh.
Ladies and gentlemen, accompanying the President-elect, the Staff Director of the Joint Congressional Committee and Inaugural Ceremonies, Fitzhugh Elder IV, the Acting House Senate Sergeant-at-Arms, Tim Blodgett, and the Acting Senate Sergeant-at-Arms, Jennifer Hemingway.
And you might see, yes, that's a little bit of a light snow, just a couple flakes falling here in Washington. Let's bring.
Please hold off. Please hold off for another half hour.
I said if it starts to blizzard, you may see Senator
45 minutes.
Klobuchar announced for president.
Reprise her snowy speech, indeed.
Well, we are just moments away from the president-elect Joe Biden being announced, as he will be sworn in shortly and give an inaugural address that his advisors say will be 20 to 30 minutes.
Of the United States,
in length.
Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. and Dr. Jill Biden. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Please welcome the Honorable Amy Klobuchar.
Vice President Pence, Mr. President-elect, Madam Vice President-elect, members of Congress and the judicial branch, former presidents and first ladies, vice presidents, leaders from abroad, and a whole bunch of Bidens. America, welcome to the 59th presidential inauguration, where in just a few moments, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will take their solemn oaths. This ceremony is the culmination of 244 years of a democracy. It is the moment when leaders brought to this stage by the will of the people promise to be faithful to our Constitution, to cherish it and defend it. It is the moment when they become, as we all should be, guardians of our country. Have we become too jaded, too accustomed to the ritual of the passing of the torch of democracy to truly appreciate what a blessing and a privilege it is to witness this moment? I think not. 2 weeks ago, when an angry, violent mob staged an insurrection and desecrated this temple of our democracy, it awakened us to our responsibilities as Americans. This is the day when our democracy picks itself up, brushes off the dust, and does what America always does: goes forward as a nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This conveyance of a sacred trust between our leaders and our people takes place in front of this shining Capitol dome for a reason. When Abraham Lincoln gave his first inaugural address in front of this Capitol, the dome was only partially constructed, braced by ropes of steel. He promised he would finish it. He was criticized for spending funds on it during the Civil War. To those critics, he replied, "If the people see the Capitol going on, it is a sign we intend the Union shall go on." And it did, and it will. Generations of Americans gave their lives to preserve our republic in this place. Great legislation to protect civil rights and economic security and lead the world was debated and crafted under this dome. Now it falls on all of us not just the two leaders we are inaugurating today, to take up the torch of our democracy, not as a weapon of political arson, but as an instrument for good. We pledge today never to take our democracy for granted as we celebrate its remarkable strength. We celebrate its resilience, its grit. We celebrate the ordinary people doing extraordinary things for our nation, the doctors and nurses on the front line of this pandemic, the officers in the Capitol, a new generation never giving up hope for justice. We celebrate a new president, Joe Biden, who vows to restore the soul of America and cross the river of our divides to a higher plane. And we celebrate our first African American, first Asian American, and first woman Vice President, Kamala Harris, who stands on the shoulders of so many on this platform who have forged the way to this day. When she takes the oath of office, little girls and boys across the world will know that anything and everything is possible. And in the end, that is America, our democracy, a country of so much good. And today, on these Capitol steps and before this glorious field of flags, we rededicate ourselves to its cause. Thank you. It is now my honor to introduce to you the senator who has worked with me and so many others to make this ceremony possible, my friend and the chair of the Inaugural Committee, Missouri Senator Roy Blunt.
Well, I should have known when Senator Klobuchar got involved, at least there'd be a touch of snow up here this morning. Of all the things we'd considered, I don't think snow was on my agenda till I walked out the door a moment ago. But thank you, Senator Klobuchar, and thanks to the other members of the Joint Congressional Committee on the Inauguration as we officially begin the 59th inaugural ceremony. I also want to thank the Joint Committee staff and our partners, particularly our security partners, for the way they've dealt with unprecedented circumstances. When I chaired the inauguration 4 years ago, I shared President Reagan's 1981 description of this event as commonplace and miraculous. Commonplace because we've done it every 4 years since 1789. Miraculous because we've done it every 4 years since 1789. Americans have celebrated this moment during war, during depression, and now during pandemic. Once again, all three branches of our government come together as the Constitution envisions. Once again, we renew our commitment to our determined democracy, forging a more perfect union. That theme for this inauguration, our determined democracy, forging a more perfect union, was announced by the Joint Committee before the election with the belief that the United States can only fulfill its promise and set an example for others if we are always working to be better than we have been. The Constitution established that determined democracy with its first three words, declaring the people as the source of the government. The Articles of Confederation hadn't done that. The Magna Carta hadn't done that. Only the Constitution says the government exists because the people are the source of the reason it exists. They immediately followed those first three words with the words to form a more perfect union. The founders did not say to form a perfect union. They did not claim that in our new country nothing would need to be improved. Fortunately, they understood that always working to be better would be the hallmark of a great democracy. The freedoms we have today, the nation we have today, is not here just because it happened, and they aren't complete. A great democracy working through the successes and failures of our history striving to be better than it had been. And we are more than we have been, and we are less than we hope to be. The assault on our Capitol at this very place just 2 weeks ago reminds us that a government designed to balance and check itself is both fragile and resilient. During the last year, the pandemic challenged our free and open society and called for extraordinary determination and sacrifice, and still challenges us today. Meeting that challenge head on have been and are healthcare workers, scientists, first responders, essential frontline workers, and so many others we depend on in so many ways. Today we come to this moment. People all over the world, as we're here, are watching and will watch what we do here. Our government comes together. The Congress and the courts join the transition of executive responsibility. One political party more pleased today and on every inaugural day than the other. But this is not a moment of division, it's a moment of unification. A new administration begins and brings with it a new beginning. And with that, our great national debate goes forward, and a determined democracy will continue to be essential in pursuit of a more perfect union and a better future for all Americans. What a privilege for me to join you today. Thank you. I'm pleased to call to the podium a longtime friend of the President-elect and his family, Father Leo O'Donovan, to lead us in an invocation. Please stand if you are able and remain standing for the national anthem and the pledge to our flag.
Thank you, Senator. You'll have to step for me. Thank you.
Gracious and merciful God, at this sacred time we come before you in need, indeed on our knees. But we come still more with hope and with our eyes raised anew to the vision of a more perfect union in our land, a union of all our citizens to promote the general welfare and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. We are a people of many races, creeds, and colors, national backgrounds, cultures, and styles, now far more numerous and on land much vaster than when Archbishop John Carroll wrote his prayer for the inauguration of George Washington 232 years ago. Archbishop Carroll prayed that you, O Creator of all, would assist with your Holy Spirit of counsel and fortitude the President of these United States, that his administration may be conducted in righteousness and be eminently useful to your people. Today we confess our past failures to live according to our vision of equality, inclusion, and freedom for all. Yet we resolutely commit still more now to renewing the vision, to caring for one another in word and deed, especially the least fortunate among us, and so becoming a light for the world. There is a power in each and every one of us that lives by turning to every other one of us, a thrust of the Spirit to cherish and care and stand by others, and above all, those most in need. It is called love, and its path is to give ever more of itself. Today, it is called American patriotism, born not of power and privilege, but of care for the common good, with malice toward none and with charity for all. For our new president, we beg of you the wisdom Solomon sought when he knelt before you and prayed for an understanding heart so that I can govern your people and know the difference between right and wrong. We trust in the counsel of the letter of James. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Pope Francis has reminded us how important it is to dream together. By ourselves, he wrote, we risk seeing mirages, things that are not there. Dreams, on the other hand, are built together. Be with us, holy mystery of love, as we dream together. Help us under our new president to reconcile the people of our land, restore our dream and invest it with peace and justice and the joy that is the overflow of love. To the glory of your name, forever, amen.
And there we saw the former president of Georgetown University, Leo Donovan, delivering the invocation. He was there when Hunter attended Georgetown and also presided over the funeral of
Ladies
Beau
and
Biden.
gentlemen, please remain standing for the presentation of our national colors by the Armed Forces Color Guard, the singing of our national anthem, and for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ladies and gentlemen, here for the singing of our national anthem, accompanied by the President's own United States Marine Band, please welcome Lady Gaga.
So proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red
Well, a spectacular performance with Lady Gaga with a dove and an olive branch.
Can I get out of my chair and applaud? Can I? We were all wondering what she was going to wear. I thought she's going to be understated and classic, and she said, nope, I'm walking out, I'm making an entrance. She has her own fashion line, but I love the dove and I love the olive branch, and it's so uniquely Lady Gaga. She can pull this off, and she sounded great.
And microphone is golden as her voice.
Yes.
And when she turned and said our flag was still there, you couldn't help but remember what happened there. And when was the last time there was violence on those steps? 1812, when that song was written.
Wow. Local 3920. Fire Captain Andrea M. Hall
Nice
for the
job.
reciting of the Pledge of Allegiance.
From Georgia.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Andrea Hall of Georgia, who in 2004 became the first black woman promoted to fire captain in the history of the city of South Fulton Fire Rescue Department.
What you are all about to be part of, America, is a historic moment of firsts. To administer the oath to our first African American, our first Asian American, and our first woman Vice President, Kamala Harris, it is my great privilege to welcome to the inaugural stage the first Latina to ever serve on the Supreme Court of the United States of America, Justice Sonia Sotomayor.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the oath of office, followed by musical honors.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Kamala Davy Harris, do solemnly swear
I, Kamala Davy Harris, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I take this obligation freely,
that I take this obligation freely,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
that I will well and faithfully discharge
that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
the duties of the office upon which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
And that is our American history.
It's at 11:42 Eastern Time.
She chose two Bibles, one of Thurgood Marshall, the first black Supreme Court justice, and the other,
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
Regina Shelton, who was like a second mother to Harris when she was growing up while her mother was working late.
Please welcome Jennifer Lopez to perform This Land Is Your Land and America the Beautiful, accompanied by members of the President's own United States Marine Band.
Oh my, look at that.
Jennifer Lopez performs at Super Bowls and now inaugurations. Campaigned for Joe Biden during the whole campaign, a huge supporter.
land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Islands, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I went walking down that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. Oh, this land, oh, this land. This land was made for you and me. Oh, this land, oh, this land. This land was made for you and me. You and me. Oh, America, America, God shed His grace on thee and crowned thy good with brotherhood. From sea to shining sea.
Una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos.
Let's get loud. 'Cause this land was made for you and me.
She's still Jenny from the block, but she just hit it
that
out
was
of the
great.
park.
The sun
Yes, she
is
did.
shining, and Mr. President-elect,
Right, lapsing
this is
into
the
Let's
first
Get Loud and in
inauguration
Spanish,
in the
Nation Under
history of
God, with
America
liberty and
where
justice for all.
J-Lo was the
Nicely
warm-up
done.
act for Chief Justice Roberts. With that,
Nicely done.
it is now my distinct honor to introduce the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, John Roberts, to administer the presidential oath to the next President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the oath of office, followed by musical honors.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the office of President of the United States
the office of President of the United States
and will, to the best of my ability,
will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States.
the Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President. Get up.
President Joseph Biden. You can see his wife, Dr. Jill Biden, in tears, elated, his whole family incredibly proud of this moment because they know the pain and suffering it's taken to get here, what they've lost in many years. He will now deliver an inaugural address that advisors say could be 20 to 30 minutes in length, where he will ask for the healing of this country.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
And this takes effect at noon, officially. We should note the football, which carries the nuclear codes, is still with President Trump in Palm Beach. We're told the code will change at noon and then it will transfer to President Joe Biden. He is taking a moment to soak this in, something he has wanted his entire life. He talked about it in high school in essays when he first met the parents of Nelia Hunter, his first wife. They asked him, what do you want to do? He said, I'm going to be president of the United States.
And yet when you see him take the oath of office, you can't help but think about the first time he took oath for federal office in the hospital at the chapel, his two sons recovering from the car accident that killed his wife, in which he said, I'm not sure I'm going to continue in politics, even serve out that term.
Yeah, and he took it with the family Bible. His oath with the family Bible.
We have all been waiting for. Yes. It is now my great privilege and high honor to be the first person to officially introduce the 46th President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden Jr.
That's nice. I love that couple speak. Yes, I love that. I love that. That was really nice.
Gail, say what you just said, couple speak.
Yeah, we just saw Dr. Jill Biden put her hands on her husband's shoulders. Like, yes, good job. Good job, honey.
She knows more than anybody else.
Vice President Harris, Speaker Pelosi, Leader Schumer, Leader McConnell, Vice President Pence, and my distinguished guests, my fellow Americans. This is America's day. This is democracy's day. A day of history and hope, of renewal and resolve. Through a crucible for the ages, America has been tested anew, and America has risen to the challenge. Today, we celebrate the triumph not of a candidate, but of a cause, the cause of democracy. The people, the will of the people has been heard, and the will of the people has been heeded. We've learned again that democracy is precious, democracy is fragile, and at this hour, my friends, democracy has prevailed. So now, on this hallowed ground where just a few days ago, violence sought to shake the Capitol's very foundation, we come together as one nation, under God, indivisible, to carry out the peaceful transfer of power as we have for more than 2 centuries. As we look ahead in our uniquely American way, restless, bold, optimistic, and set our sights on the nation we know we can be and we must be. I thank my predecessors of both parties for their presence here today. I thank them from the bottom of my heart. And I know the resilience of our Constitution and the strength of our nation, as does President Carter, who I spoke with last night, who cannot be with us today, but whom we salute for his lifetime in service. I've just taken the sacred oath each of those patriots have taken. The oath first sworn by George Washington. But the American story depends not on any one of us, not on some of us, but on all of us, on we, the people, who seek a more perfect union. This is a great nation. We are good people. And over the centuries, through storm and strife, in peace and in war, we've come so far, but we still have far to go. We'll press forward with speed and urgency, for we have much to do in this winter of peril and significant possibilities. Much to repair, much to restore, much to heal, much to build, and much to gain. Few people in our nation's history have been more challenged or found a time more challenging or difficult than the time we're in now. Once-in-a-century virus that silently stalks the country. It's taken as many lives in 1 year as America lost in all of World War II. Millions of jobs have been lost. Hundreds of thousands of businesses closed. A cry for racial justice, some 400 years in the making, moves us. The dream of justice for all will be deferred no longer. A cry for survival comes from the planet itself, a cry that can't be any more desperate or any more clear. And now, a rise of political extremism, white supremacy, domestic terrorism, that we must confront and we will defeat. To overcome these challenges, to restore the soul and secure the future of America, requires so much more than words. It requires the most elusive of all things in a democracy: unity. Unity. In another January, on New Year's Day in 1863, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. When he put pen to paper, the president said, and I quote, "If my name ever goes down into history, it'll be for this act, and my whole soul is in it." My whole soul is in it. Today, on this January day, my whole soul is in this, bringing America together, uniting our people, uniting our nation. And I ask every American to join me in this cause. Uniting to fight the foes we face: anger, resentment and hatred, extremism, lawlessness, violence, disease, joblessness, and hopelessness. With unity, we can do great things, important things. We can right wrongs. We can put people to work in good jobs. We can teach our children in safe schools. We can overcome the deadly virus. We can reward work and rebuild the middle class and make health care secure for all. We can deliver racial justice, and we can make America once again the leading force for good in the world. I know speaking of unity can sound to some like a foolish fantasy these days. I know the forces that divide us are deep and they are real. But I also know they are not new. Our history has been a constant struggle between the American ideal that we're all are created equal and the harsh, ugly reality that racism, nativism, fear, demonization have long torn us apart. The battle is perennial, and victory is never assured. Through Civil War, the Great Depression, World War, 9/11, through struggle, sacrifice, and setbacks, our better angels have always prevailed. In each of these moments, enough of us have come together to carry all of us forward. And we can do that now. History, faith, and reason show the way of unity. We can see each other not as adversaries, but as neighbors. We can treat each other with dignity and respect. We can join forces, stop the shouting, and lower the temperature. For without unity, there is no peace, only bitterness and fury. No progress, only exhausting outrage. No nation, only a state of chaos. This is our historic moment of crisis and challenge, and unity is the path forward. And we must meet this moment as the United States of America. If we do that, I guarantee you we will not fail. We have never, ever, ever, ever failed in America when we've acted together. And so today, at this time, in this place, let's start afresh, all of us. Let's begin to listen to one another again, hear one another, see one another, show respect to one another. Politics doesn't have to be a raging fire, destroying everything in its path. Every disagreement doesn't have to be a cause for total war. And we must reject the culture in which facts themselves are manipulated and even manufactured. My fellow Americans, we have to be different than this. America has to be better than this. And I believe America is so much better than this. Just look around. Here we stand in the shadow of the Capitol Dome, as was mentioned earlier, completed amid the Civil War, when the Union itself was literally hanging in the balance. Yet we endured. We prevailed. Here we stand, looking out on the Great Mall, where Dr. King spoke of his dream. Here we stand, where 108 years ago, at another inaugural, thousands of protesters tried to block brave women marching for the right to vote. And today, we mark the swearing in of the first woman in American history elected to national office, Vice President Kamala Harris. Don't tell me things can't change. Here we stand, across the Potomac from Arlington Cemetery, where heroes who gave the last full measure of devotion rest in eternal peace. And here we stand, just days after a riotous mob thought they could use violence to silence the will of the people, to stop the work of our democracy, to drive us from this sacred ground. It did not happen. It will never happen. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. Not ever. To all those who supported our campaign, I'm humbled by the faith you've placed in us. To all those who did not support us, let me say this. Hear me out as we move forward. Take a measure of me and my heart. And if you still disagree, so be it. That's democracy. That's America. The right to dissent peaceably within the guardrails of our republic is perhaps this nation's greatest strength. Yet hear me clearly. Disagreement must not lead to disunion. And I pledge this to you. I will be a president for all Americans. All Americans. And I promise you, I will fight as hard for those who did not support me as for those who did. Many centuries ago, St. Augustine, a saint of my church, wrote that a people was a multitude defined by the common objects of their love. Defined by the common objects of their love. What are the common objects we as Americans love that define us as Americans? I think we know. Opportunity, security, liberty, dignity, respect, honor, and yes, the truth. Recent weeks and months have taught us a painful lesson. There is truth and there are lies. Lies told for power and for profit. And each of us has a duty and a responsibility as citizens, as Americans, and especially as leaders. Leaders who have pledged to honor our Constitution and protect our nation, to defend the truth and defeat the lies. Look, I understand that many of my fellow Americans view the future with fear and trepidation. I understand they worry about their jobs. I understand, like my dad, they lay in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering, can I keep my health care? Can I pay my mortgage? Thinking about their families, about what comes next. I promise you, I get it. But the answer is not to turn inward, to retreat into competing factions, distrusting those who don't look like you, or worship the way you do, or don't get their news from the same sources you do. We must end this uncivil war that pits red against blue, rural versus urban, conservative versus liberal. We can do this if we open our souls instead of hardening our hearts, if we show a little tolerance and humility, and if we're willing to stand in the other person's shoes, as my mom would say, just for a moment, stand in their shoes. Because here's the thing about life. There's no accounting for what fate will deal you. Some days, when you need a hand. There are other days when we're called to lend a hand. That's how it has to be. That's what we do for one another. And if we are this way, our country will be stronger, more prosperous, more ready for the future. And we can still disagree. My fellow Americans, in the work ahead of us, we're going to need each other. We need all our strength to persevere through this dark winter. We're entering what may be the toughest and deadliest period of the virus. We must set aside politics and finally face this pandemic as one nation. One nation. And I promise you this, as the Bible says, weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. We will get through this together. Together. Look, folks, all my colleagues I serve with in the House and the Senate up here, we all understand the world is watching all of us today. So here's my message to those beyond our borders. America has been tested, and we've come out stronger for it. We will repair our alliances and engage with the world once again, not to meet yesterday's challenges, but today's and tomorrow's challenges. And we'll lead not merely by the example of our power, but by the power of our example. We'll be a strong and trusted partner for peace, progress, and security. Look, you all know we've been through so much in this nation. And my first act as president, I'd like to ask you to join me in a moment of silent prayer. Remember all of those who we lost in this past year to the pandemic. Those 400,000 fellow Americans, moms, dads, husbands, wives, sons, daughters, friends, neighbors, and co-workers. We'll honor them by becoming the people and the nation we know we can and should be. So I ask you, let's say a silent prayer for those who've lost their lives and those left behind, and for our country. Amen. Folks, this is a time of testing. We face an attack on our democracy and on truth, a raging virus growing inequity, the sting of systemic racism, a climate in crisis, America's role in the world. Any one of these would be enough to challenge us in profound ways. But the fact is, we face them all at once, presenting this nation with one of the gravest responsibilities we've had. Now we're going to be tested. Are we going to step up, all of us? It's time for boldness, for there's so much to do. And this is certain. I promise you, we will be judged, you and I, by how we resolve these cascading crises of our era. We will rise to the occasion is the question. Will we master this rare and difficult hour? Will we meet our obligations and pass along a new and better world to our children? I believe we must. I'm sure you do as well. I believe we will. And when we do, we'll write the next great chapter in the history of the United States of America, the American story. A story that might sound something like a song that means a lot to me. It's called American Anthem. There's one verse that stands out, at least for me, and it goes like this. The work and prayers of century have brought us to this day. What shall be our legacy? What will our children say? Let me know in my heart when my days are through. America, America, I gave my best to you. Let's us add our own work and prayers to the unfolding story of our great nation. If we do this, then when our days are through, our children and our children's children will say of us, they gave their best, they did their duty, they healed a broken land. My fellow Americans, I close the day where I began, with the sacred oath. Before God and all of you, I give you my word. I will always level with you. I will defend the Constitution. I'll defend our democracy. I'll defend America. And I will give all of you, keep everything I do in your service, thinking not of power, but of possibilities, not of personal interest, but the public good. And together, we shall write an American story, a story of decency and dignity, love and healing, greatness and goodness. May this be the story that guides us, the story that inspires us, and the story that tells ages yet to come that we answered the call of history. We met the moment. Democracy and hope, truth and justice did not die on our watch but thrived. That America secured liberty at home and stood once again as a beacon to the world. That is what we owe our forebears, one another, and generation to follow. So, with purpose and resolve, we turn to those tasks of our time, sustained by faith, driven by conviction, and devoted to one another and the country we love with all our hearts. May God bless America, and may God protect our troops. Thank you, America.
And there you have it, the 46th President of the United States, President Joseph R. Biden, saying today we celebrate the triumph not of a candidate, but of a cause, and the cause is democracy, noting that democracy has prevailed. His advisors had promised a speech and a presidency in which he would focus on healing. This speech was the first step in that, where he said, with unity, we can do great things. And he said, we must end this uncivil war that pits red against blue. Dr. Jill Biden specifically requested Garth Brooks to sing, and so we will listen to the country music legend.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. If I can ask you to sing this last verse with me, not just the people here, but the people at home, at work, as one, united. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
Obama saying amen.
Did it?
And that's very much like Garth Brooks to ask people to sing with him, and a needed moment in America.
Well, it's certainly a song that we all know, and we joined in the studio. I got goosebumps listening to him because it is the word unity.
And there you see
matters.
Garth Brooks giving hugs to the former First Ladies, Hillary Clinton, as well as Michelle Obama. We should note, too, everyone on this stage has been tested twice in the past 72 hours, strict COVID protocols. We should return as we continue to watch this. Just President Joe Biden's speech, and John, they delivered on their promise of trying to use this address to really call people toward unity.
Yes, I mean,
our culture is as close to both poetry.
a couple of things really struck me. One, in inaugural addresses, usually the presidents say, we are the democracy that is the example for the world. And he spoke to a much more fragile democracy that prevailed, absolutely, that was still strong and still standing, but was as fragile as it looks when you go down to the mall, where the mall is now something that looks protected under glass like it's at a museum. So he spoke to the fragility of it. I was struck that he added the battle between truth and lies to the list of great tasks before him. And he basically said what Jefferson did, which is...
Let's listen to Amanda Gorman.
Mr. President, Dr. Biden, Madam Vice President, Mr. Emhoff, Americans, and the world. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace. In the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is hours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together, victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promised glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared it at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So, while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens. But one thing is certain: if we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the West. We will rise from the wind-swept Northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked South. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
And at 22, the youngest poet to read at an Inauguration Day ceremony, following another famous poets like Maya Angelou, Robert Frost, and knocking it
I have a great Amanda story, Nora. Maya did Bill Clinton's address.
Thank you, Amanda Gorman.
She reached out to Amanda to say, because she had brought Maya her coat that she wore that day, and said, I'd like to get a coat for you to carry on the tradition. She said, I've already picked out my coat. It's yellow. It's my favorite color. And Oprah said, well, what else could I do? And she said, I don't know. Oprah got her the earrings that she's wearing, and on her hand she has a ring that's shaped like a cage bird as a tribute to Maya. I know why the cage bird sings. So when I was looking at her, I was looking at the earrings and the ring. It's a very sweet, now they are bonded for life, the two of them, but it was a very sweet moment between the two. Tradition continues for Oprah and
This
Maya.
is the benediction now by the pastor of Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Wilmington, Delaware.
Let us unite in prayer. God, we gather under the beauty of your holiness and the holiness of your beauty. We seek your face, your smile, your warm embrace. We petition you once more in this celebration. We pray for divine favor upon our President, Joseph R. Biden, and our First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, and their family. We further ask that you would extend the same favor upon our Vice President, Kamala D. Harris, and our second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, and their family. More than ever, they and our nation need you. We need you, for in you we discover our common humanity. In our common humanity, we will seek out the wounded and bind their wounds. We will seek healing for those who are sick and diseased. We will mourn our dead. We will befriend the lonely, the least, and the left out. We will share our abundance with those who are hungry. We will do justly to the oppressed, acknowledge sin, and seek forgiveness, thus grasping reconciliation. In discovering our humanity, we will seek the good in and for all our neighbors. We will love the unlovable, remove the stigma of the so-called untouchables. We will care for our most vulnerable, our children, the elderly, emotionally challenged, and the poor. We will seek rehabilitation beyond correction. We will extend opportunity to those locked out of opportunity. We will make friends of our enemies. We will make friends of our enemies. People, your people, shall no longer raise up weapons against one another. We will rather use our resources for the national good and become a beacon of life and goodwill to the world. And neither shall we learn hatred anymore. We will lie down in peace and not make our neighbors afraid. In you, O God, we discover our humanity. In our humanity, we discover our commonness. Beyond the difference of color, creed, origin, political party, ideology, geography, and personal preferences, we'll become greater stewards of your environment, preserving the land, reaping from it a sustainable harvest, and securing its wonder and miracle-giving power for generations to come. This is our benediction, that from these hallowed grounds, where slaves labored to build this shrine and citadel to liberty and democracy, let us all acknowledge, from the indigenous Native American to those who recently received their citizenship, from the African American to those whose foreparents came from Europe and every corner of the globe, from the wealthy to those struggling to make it, from every human being regardless of their choices, that this is our country. As such, teach us, O God. As such, teach us, O God, to live in it, love in it, be healed in it, and reconcile to one another in it, lest we miss kingdom's goal. To your glory, majesty, dominion, and power forever. Hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah. In the strong name of our collective faith. Amen.
Please remain standing as the Armed Forces Color Guard retires our national colors.
What a beautiful and strong benediction by Pastor Beeman. We will make friends with our enemies, he repeated twice.
And he said that twice. That's the line that stood out to me. And also Father Leo from Georgetown. There seems to be a whole theme here about humanity, making friends with your enemies. I like Father, you know him from Georgetown. He said American patriotism with malice toward none and charity for all. I think that's the message we keep hearing over and over and over again.
Reconciliation,
yes.
reconciliation, and of course, drawing on the words of a former president.
Yeah, exactly. The inaugurations are often talked about as a covenanting, which, you know, a renewal of promise. And so when you hear that religious language, although I'm struck by Amanda Gorman's line, there's always a light if we're brave enough to see it. There's always a light if we're brave enough to be it.
Yes.
Which brings us all, brings everyone into the process.
The president and official party depart the platform.
She's a brilliant writer.
Your ushers will
What struck me is there is a theme in the inaugural address of the president of Amazing Grace and Amanda's poem. See. She says, we have the courage to see. What is Amazing Grace about? I was once blind, but now I see. What does Joe Biden ask the country to do in his inaugural address? See truth. Distinguish truth from things that are lies, said for power and for profit. It's an asking throughout for us to see each other, ourselves, and our nation.
And the Obamas and the Bidens embracing.
Major, to pick up on what you said, I love when Joe Biden said, hear me out, take measure of my heart. Disagreements should not lead to disunion. I don't think we can repeat that theme too much.
And to his point about trying to pursue unity in this country, he said, my whole soul is in this.
Yes.
And then later on he said, if enough of us do that, we can bring the rest of us along. He's not looking for everyone. He's looking for enough to create unity and a renewed sense of purpose. All those things threaded through his inaugural address.
Margaret Brennan is with us as well. Margaret?
You know, Nora, I think particularly for all of us as journalists, it was really resonant to hear the president say, you know, this is about defending the truth and defeating the lies, and reminding us all of our responsibility in that, and referring in his speech to the point Gail made earlier, that there isn't a common agreement right now on a set of facts, and the need and the responsibility both for those who provide them to the public and those in the public who need to go out and consume them and make sure they find them. And it reminded me of that CBS News poll that we have that showed that 71% of Americans right now believe that democracy itself is in peril. And I wonder how much that changes today with this transition that we all watch. I wonder how much that statistic that over 50% of Americans see their fellow Americans as the biggest threat changes based on what happened here today, because this was a transition of power. It was not a peaceful one, but today in this moment that was allowed to actually happen as we all hold our breath, thanks to all of the security forces who are here to oversee it.
Nora, I'm struck. I think he may have put a title on what we're going through, the idea that we must end this uncivil war, as he called it, that pits red against blue, rural against urban, conservative versus liberal. It expanded on themes that he would share almost daily on the campaign trail, quoting scripture, quoting his father, notably not quoting an Irish poet, which I think many of us thought he might, as he did yesterday leaving Delaware. And I'm struck by something that the former House Speaker Paul Ryan, who is also there today, told reporters as he came into the Capitol, and I would associate myself with this. He says, our institutions were tested this year, and our institutions passed the test. And I think as we see him take office and move forward now, that's a very true statement.
I was struck by something Joe Biden said yesterday when he was in Delaware, that he got very emotional and said, Delaware's on my will always be on my heart. And the thing that he missed most was that his beloved Beau wasn't there. He becomes the 46th president, and Beau Biden died at the age of 46. And I just think that there's something poetic in that, too.
And no doubt something on his mind. CBS is, and that's so like the Bidens, to be saying thank you to anybody who's there and helping out and acknowledging others. They have a natural tendency to think of others, an empathetic way about them because of not only their lifelong career in public service, but also because of the great loss that they have suffered. And there you see Vice President Kamala Harris and her husband. He says he will teach at Georgetown University as well, and so he'll be working, and Dr. Joe Biden says she'll be working. That is a first as they continue their academic and teaching careers. He was a lawyer in private practice before, but now he's going to teach law. Let's go to CBS's Nancy Cordes, because she has a spot on the platform where the president and vice president were sworn in. Nancy?
Nora, what I kept thinking as I was listening to this speech with its overwhelming theme of unity, that there are few politicians in Washington, perhaps no politicians in Washington, who can lay claim to that kind of message like Joe Biden can. I mean, look, he was in the Senate for 36 years, and he had a reputation there of constantly trying to work across the aisle. He was often the person who President Obama dispatched to Capitol Hill to try to cut a deal during his 8 years as vice president. In fact, the biggest knock on him from members of his own party is that he's been too eager sometimes to try to work with the other side and find common ground. Democrats have worried in the past that he might give up too much. So when he spoke those words today, in fact, turning to many of his former colleagues saying, look, the world is watching. We need to come together. We need to do big things if we're going to try to address the crises that we face. There are very few people with the credibility to make that argument with the reputation to back it up. And Joe Biden is certainly one of them.
On pool two, one of the cameras, I just see Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama catching up, embracing one another. Of course, she served as his Secretary of State when he was President of the United States. This was a team that all worked very closely together for 8 years as part of the national security apparatus. Joe Biden, of course, part of that as well. Many of them will go inside the Capitol. There will be an honorary departure and a signing ceremony. And then all of the former presidents will head over to Arlington Cemetery to place a wreath there. So our coverage continues. And Nancy, as you're with us, I just want to ask you, since you will be our chief White House correspondent and covering the White House for us, this is a president that plans to hit the ground running, going right to work tonight.
Exactly. This is a day of pomp and circumstance, but it's also a work day. And he's going to be signing a slew of executive orders that will roll back some very key elements of the Trump agenda. He is going to be rejoining the Paris Climate Accords. He's going to be signing a national mask mandate, encouraging the wearing of masks on federal property. He is going to be rolling back the president's travel ban on predominantly Muslim countries. This is an administration that has a very clear sense of what it wants to get done, not just on day one, but on day two and day three. So they don't have any of their cabinet members confirmed. It could take months for some of his legislative agenda to work its way through Congress, if it's able to get through at all. But there are a number of things that he can do via executive order, and he plans to sign those executive orders this afternoon, Nora.
And then there's more, too. I mean, they've already signaled not only what they're going to do today, but what they're going to do tomorrow and then this week, correct?
Right. He wants to rejoin the World Health Organization. They have a number of immigration executive orders that he plans to sign as well. Executive orders having to do with racial justice. This administration and this president have been very clear about the four key pillars of their platform, having to do with the climate crisis, the COVID crisis, the economic crisis, and what they describe as a racial injustice crisis as well. And so everything that you'll see them do over the next few days fits into one of those four categories. They want to make it very clear to the American people what they want to achieve, not just in the next couple of days, but over the next 4 years.
Nancy Cortez, thank you. Ed O'Keefe is also going to be covering the White House for us as our senior White House correspondent. And Ed, we mentioned that they've already laid out what they want to do.
They have. And I think a lot of it designed, frankly, to essentially make use of what is available to a president through executive action, but also sort of get ahead of Congress, which is clearly going to take a little while longer. They have to sort out here. This afternoon, we're likely to learn more about how they're going to handle the impeachment trial, how quickly some of these cabinet nominees will be put in place, how quickly they'll be able to take up his proposed $1.9 trillion COVID rescue plan and his ambitious immigration plan. So they've mapped out everything through about next Tuesday, but clearly many more days to go and a lot of negotiating to be done.
I've heard the critics say, you know, why do we even have to go through the impeachment trial? Especially after you look at this in unity, let's move on, let's carry on. But I've also heard that you can't really heal without accountability, that there are two schools of thought, that until there is accountability to what happened to us 3 weeks ago today, it was 3 weeks ago today, January 6th,
2 weeks.
It's 2 weeks. See,
feels like 3 weeks.
Yeah. It does feel like I was never good in math, Nora. But 2 weeks ago today, you know, it is very difficult. I look at what happened that day on the Capitol, and I never thought democracy could be so fragile. I never thought that. And then you see it in real time happening. And so it went from the actual event, and then a week later we heard more horrible details of what happened that day. And then you realize, oh, we cannot just let this be.
And there's so much in this inaugural address that isn't in previous ones, because previous inaugural addresses always said there's a kind of given in America. We have all these things we understand about each other, especially during the Cold War. Everything was outlooking, dealing with the Cold War and all those challenges and all those anxieties. This was an inaugural address about there are things that we thought were givens that aren't. And we need to deal with. We need to be civil with each other. We need to be truthful with one another. We need to not have manufactured and manipulated political differences, the president's very own words. These things that we used to assume we could handle as civic norms, the president is saying, actually, we've learned we can't. We need to reinvest ourselves and rework on those things before we can accomplish these other great goals.
He said America has been tested and we've come out stronger. I do think that's true. Just the fact that we can have this ceremony at the Capitol 2 weeks ago, considering what happened 2 weeks ago, that we can still have it outside. And no, listen, so far so good. I feel very protected here. I know people are on the job and on the case and want to keep us safe.
He talked about the guardrails of our society, and those guardrails were tested, and also some people thought they weren't maybe guardrails anymore. I'm struck that also when he comes into the job, he's got that amazing to-do list. He's also the most experienced legislator since LBJ. And how many phone calls is he going to make? One of the things that Mitch McConnell says that's favorable about Joe Biden is he knows how far I can go, and he can work that. So what role will he play? Because when you're president, you can't muck about and get involved up to your elbows. But on the other hand, he does have that understanding of what politicians need. On the other hand, a lot of the politicians on the other side of the aisle from him now are wholly different than the ones he used to serve with. And so this interaction between the offices, between the branches will be fascinating to watch.
So there's something to be said about experience, huh, John Dickerson?
Yeah.
In all things.
And
yes, Nora.
As Bill Clinton continues to hold court there on the presidential platform, catching up with Senator Manchin and others, and many people taking an opportunity to take a picture with Hillary Clinton. I just want to note that what you're seeing on the east front of the Capitol is the honorary departure. Now, typically that's where the president and the first lady get on what was then Marine One, but is a specially designated helicopter ride, and they leave to wherever they're going to go. Since President Trump and his wife boycotted this inauguration, there is instead going to be a goodbye to Vice President Pence, who will drive away in his motorcade. And President Biden will not attend, but I understand that Vice President Kamala Harris will attend that goodbye for the former Vice President, now Mike Pence.
And Nora, if I could just say one thing about the podium as people are walking away. I love these things that are uniquely American. So almost no one, including presidents, got anything more than a folding chair. In their past president life, they sit in a folding chair, okay? Because that's what happens in America.
Yes.
All presidents, when they open their inaugural address, say, my fellow citizens. Well, guess what? When you become a former president, you become much closer to a regular citizen. And there tonight, this afternoon, folding chairs for former presidents and Supreme Court justices, the humility of America, what America does that sort of says we're much closer to each other, even in our regalness, even in our great former offices we held, we can sit in a folding chair.
And this is the goodbye for the former Vice President, Mike Pence. You can see Officer Goodman, who has now transitioned into an acting Deputy Senate Sergeant at Arms. He is wearing a tan or camel-colored coat as part of this ceremony, as he saved many lives in the U.S. Senate and will be recognized by congressional leaders.
That's an interesting conversation there. Vice President.
And one they never had until
Vice President, yes.
They could have, I mean, they didn't, they spoke last week very briefly, but they never met in person over the course of the transition. There was hope they might.
And we're told that he did leave a note for her, that Mike Pence did leave a note for her.
It is tradition, as you point out, that the Vice President would invite his successor over to the vice presidential mansion home, and that the president would invite the incoming president. That did not happen this year. Much has changed, and that's why we see this goodbye, which is different. We don't usually see something like this before. We usually see Marine One, the giant helicopter waiting to whisk the former president away. And we know now that former President Trump is in Florida, in Palm Beach at Mar-a-Lago, and is no longer the President of the United States. Mike Pence leaves literally without a home to return to. He doesn't own any real estate, actually, but he's going back to Indiana with some of his vice presidential staff who will remain with him. There are questions about his future within the Republican Party. He had hoped to inherit the Trump legacy, but as one close advisor to him said, he lost the MAGA crowd on January 6th.
By protecting the Constitution and federal law, I think it's worth it.
And that's the reckoning that will happen within the Republican Party that is still being sought out by and still tearing at now Republican leader Mitch McConnell, who I thought interestingly not only laid the blame at Trump's feet, saying he provoked that mob, but he also branded the lies that were fed to those people. That was a word that President Biden used today. He said it's time to defeat the lies.
Well, he set that up as one of the great challenges before him, before the whole country. And arguably, you can't get to a lot of the other challenges until you get back to figuring out whether we believe reason, facts, and tradition still are at play in America. And the impeachment question is one place where that will be adjudicated. But there are all those lawmakers who fed those lies, to use Mitch McConnell's words, and they have not had a reckoning with their past behavior, and that seems to be would have to be the precondition to the future.
I'm always fascinated by that, because I thought certainly after what we all witnessed on January 6th, that there's no way anybody could go and vote and still say that this election was not legit. After what the country was put through, yet several Republicans did in the House. Now I look at this ceremony that we have today. I wonder what's going to happen in the Senate now. After you listen to the words, you listen to Mitch McConnell, who seems to be sending some kind of message to his team. You listen to Joe Biden, who says, "Hear my heart." Democracy was challenged, but we prevailed.
There's actually we're going to see a lot of pomp and circumstance for the afternoon, a lot of ceremony, a lot of symbolism. There's going to be some news made over the course of the day as well, as things start to change here in Washington. To this conversation we're having, as we were speaking, 17 House Republicans, 11 of whom voted against the results of the Electoral College, have sent a letter to the new president saying that they are willing to work with him on issues like COVID relief, protecting pre-existing conditions, enhancing infrastructure, and rebuilding the economy. Those are all basic issues that are clearly facing the new president that he wants to work with Congress on. To some extent, this is a signal, perhaps, that these Republicans, only 17 of them, 11 of whom voted against the Electoral College results, may have heard from their constituents and realize they have to extend an olive branch today. Don't be surprised in the coming days if we hear that the new president may.
The way you said that,
that's a reconciliation of sorts.
It's an attempt at it, at least, certainly.
But the way he said it, Nora, I thought you were going to say, despite what happened this afternoon, 17 have still said, but it actually had a very good turn at the end.
Yeah, they are willing to work with him. And
they saw Gaga's dove in the olive branch. and make that okay.
That's right. We should talk about, as we see now the final goodbye to Mike Pence, the end of the Trump-Pence presidency. What is ahead? Because I think many people want to know what's going to change. There is certainly a message being sent from President Biden. They want to change as much as they can, as quickly as they can. Let's bring in Margaret Brennan from Face the Nation. And Margaret, how much change can they do and how quickly?
Well, this is where the process may get in the way of some of the promises, because we are still waiting to see those 3 new Democratic senators sworn in this afternoon. There's a lot of process on the Hill that needs to even give Joe Biden, the president, the team he wants by his side to execute all the things he has promised. We know right now, if you're wondering who's running the government, well, at Homeland Security, at a time when we're talking about the threat of domestic terrorism, it's a temp. It's the head of the TSA, because the secretary has not been confirmed yet. And in fact, a Republican senator, one of the very same who refused to accept the election outcome and tried to contest things on January 6th, is objecting to his nomination. The Secretary of State is not in place. He's 4th in line to the presidency. Tony Blinken waiting on a vote there. And we know that a career diplomat is running the State Department in the meantime. At the Pentagon, also, all temps in place, but some career professionals filling that role as we wait to see whether Congress will approve both a waiver and a confirmation for retired General Lloyd Austin, because he so recently served as head of CENTCOM. And for retired generals to take on a civilian role, they need Congress's approval to do it. So Joe Biden, it may take a few days here, but it just shows you that for someone who needs to get on the ground running quickly, it may be a little bit more complicated than that. But we know the national security team otherwise is in place, and we will wait to see what promises Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader, can deliver in terms of delivering the votes. I know, and I've been told by the Biden team, that they are pushing very hard. And I know Senator Marco Rubio publicly said today he skipped the inauguration because as head of the Intelligence Committee, he said there was work he needed to do to try to get the Director of National Intelligence confirmed. Avril Haines also still not on the job at that agency as they wait on Capitol Hill.
It's an excellent point, Margaret, that Congress, particularly the Senate, has a lot of work ahead of them to get the Biden team confirmed and in place, not only to protect American national security, but then to carry out the Biden agenda. You're looking at pictures now of Senator Cory Booker, who I believe brought as his guest his girlfriend, Rosario Dawson.
I saw her. They had matching masks, I saw.
The masks. This is also one for the history books. Seeing the masked crowd there on the presidential platform. I have heard from some people texting how unusual it is to see people hugging. I know for many of us that's just not something we've done. We just haven't been in.
Yes.
None of us, at least I'll speak for myself, but I haven't been in a situation with 30 or 50 other people.
Yeah.
And the hugging that goes on. That is.
I noticed that too.
That is typical of any politician's career. But I think many of them feel safe since they have been tested twice in the past, 72 hours and masked, but certainly like something we haven't all seen, given that we are in the midst of a raging pandemic.
And to the surprise of no one, it is Bill Clinton conducting the most active conversations and lingering longest among
yes.
his friends and neighbors in politics in American life.
He is the most loquacious of all the former.
Yeah,
he
that's
loves
right.
to talk. He loves to talk.
Especially after this pandemic.
Yeah, what follows a Bill Clinton dinner speech? Breakfast. To say that about Hubert Humphrey. But, you asked Nora what's different. And one thing is what's different is people were not made more jittery by that speech. After President Trump's inaugural, people were a little wide-eyed.
Shell-shocked.
And Joe Biden is naturally, because he's been in politics so long and it is his instinct, just going to fall into the traditions of the president. One of them is lowering the temperature, as he said in his speech. Yeah. The job of the president, as originally conceived, was to cool the passions, not keep stoking them. And just that simple, which he will do all the time, is one way in which, in one of many ways, we'll see him be different.
In fact, John Dickerson has written an article that is out today. Said it's time for Joe Biden to become a boring president. That's what people want. So
Is
we're going to
boring
talk
a compliment, John?
It is.
If you read the piece, it is. I know you have.
I'm looking for a tease to hold
Sure.
everybody
God love you.
attention.
That's right.
Because we have to take a quick break. When we come back, that very topic about whether we all want a boring president, and also the new president's trip to Arlington Cemetery, and there's an inaugural parade straight ahead.